his channel, teaching the gospel on listener-supported television.
Hi there, welcome to this evening's program. We're going to have a very fascinating time with a gentleman called Jeff Thompson, who's a little bit of a troublemaker, a Bible smuggler. He's been arrested, he's banned from Russia, but he's doing an extraordinary work into North Korea. What an incredible way of starting. And Holland Davis, who I'm sure many of you know, who is the pastor of Calvary Chapel, San Clemente, a place that is so beautiful that nobody should be allowed to live there. It's terrible. And Holland is a very well-known worship leader, composer. And we're going to try a little bit of an experiment tonight because we normally do one guest and then the other guest, but we're going to switch between the two of them because they're so intriguing. And I'm going to start with Jeff, who is also the CEO and president of Mercy Projects. But Jeff, tell me a little bit about this, leaving the American sector. Now, I happen to know a little bit about it, but many of our younger listeners and viewers will not know anything about the dark days of communism, particularly in Eastern Europe and Berlin. You were living in Berlin. You were a Bible smuggler. Tell us a little bit about your life there, why you went to Eastern Europe.
Well, Dan, it's kind of amazing to think that, one day in time you had to smuggle Bibles, but indeed we were. As the days of communism, the Cold War, Ronald Reagan as president, and God called me as a young man to serve him overseas, and it ended up being in Eastern Europe. So I had no idea how to do that. I joined a mission team located in Europe, in Western Europe and Austria, and eventually in Berlin. And we began going across the borders of Eastern Europe, through the Iron Curtain, smuggling Bibles to the believers there. And one day ended up in Berlin, where our children were actually born, and crossing Checkpoint Charlie.
Right.
And, quite often, and even got on a first name basis with some of the border guards.
Oh boy.
Which was not a good thing at that time.
Now, can you explain, Berlin was split into 4 pieces, and your part was the American sector, but you would have to go across this very scary border. Can you describe what it was like?
After World War II, they divided Germany up into 4 sectors, into 4 sections. The Americans and the French and the British and the Russians. We were all allies in World War II. So Berlin, having been the capital, was also divided into 4ths. But the Americans and the British and the French, we all sort of joined forces, and that became what we called West Berlin, or Free Berlin. The Soviet sector, they put up a wall. They built a wall in August 1961, and they, by doing so, imprisoned the people on the other side, on their side, in East Berlin. So that's how we ended up with this East and West Berlin with this wall through the middle. Eventually, after a couple of years, that wall was 12 feet high, 102 miles long, kept a couple of million people just in Berlin alone, in East Berlin, as prisoners. Families were divided. And so it was later on that in the 80s that God called us to go over there and begin traveling basically as a tourist into East Berlin and smuggling Bibles in across Checkpoint Charlie.
So many people wouldn't have realized there were believers living in the communist countries, including East Germany.
Well, Europe has a history of Christianity, so there were existing churches there. But the Soviets, and under communism, they came in and they persecuted them, or they would try to limit them to just that building, where they were located at. But there were pockets of believers.
Now, I've been through communist borders. I've never been so scared in all my life. Absolutely horrible. Tell us what it was like when you'd get to that border. There would be, dogs and watchtowers?
Yes, you would, arrive to a border and they would want to know, where are you going? Why are you coming over here? What do you want to accomplish? They want to see your passport. On many occasions, you were thoroughly searched. Your body was searched, perhaps your vehicle. On one occasion, I had a back seat taken out of the car, dashboard being unhinged, parts of the engine coming up. Sometimes we'd really get taken apart. And I had many times, actually, where I would hide the Bibles, let's say, in a door panel. And maybe not in the driver's side, but put them in the passenger side. And maybe in the back doors of the car, but not the driver's side. And they would tear the driver's side panel off and look inside. There were no Bibles there. We were okay. We had many occasions where we'd put the Bibles in the back seat. I'd pull the cushion out of the back seat, stuff that with books and Bibles, and then they would press down on it, press hard, and it was just very hard,
Yeah.
And as if the Lord clouded their mind, they didn't understand, and it would come through successful.
Yeah, but Brother Andrew used to have, what was it, the smuggler's prayer?
Smuggler's prayer, yes.
Is that something you would do? You'd pray that God would blind the eyes of the guards? Or?
I prayed that God would bring me back safely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, that he would blind the eyes of the guards, and he did.
Yes.
I did get caught, of course, one time, but all the other times he did.
Now, while we have people waiting on the edge of their chairs about what happened when you got caught, we're going now to meet with Holland. And what is intriguing about this conversation, Holland, is that you weren't born in the U.S. You were, and I was born in West Africa. So we're a very a weird mixture, an illustration of what the body of Christ is, really.
That's
right. Tell us about your early life. You were born in Japan. Tell us about your family.
Well, my dad was a Marine, so he went over to Japan and met my mom over there. And
your mom was Japanese?
My mom's Japanese, and so I was made in Japan, of course, and then was born there. But God, later brought me back to Japan. And my dad did another tour of duty there, and that's where I met the Lord. I actually met the Lord in Japan. So I was born in Japan, and I was born again in Japan.
So what happened then?
Well, I was literally, at this time, I'm like 13 years old, and there was one meeting place in our trailer park where we lived off base.
Yeah.
And it was a Young Life meeting. And so they had the two things that every 13-year-old boy loves. They had girls and they had free food. And so I was there every week, enjoying the girls and getting the free food. And then I was learning to play guitar, and so the guy said, "Why don't you just bring your guitar and play along with us?" And so they were leading worship, and so in a sense, I started leading worship before I was even saved. And God was just, I had no idea that would become part of who I was. But I remember one night where, in this time of just, they would, do worship, and then they would read the Bible. They wouldn't really even explain it; they would just read it. And they were reading John chapter 3.
Yeah.
From beginning to end. And he got to John 3:16, and he said, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him would never perish but have everlasting life." And as soon as I heard that, I heard literally it was like a literal voice. It was inside me. Felt like it was outside my body. And it just, and this voice said, "Holland, I love you." And as soon as I heard that voice, I just started sobbing. I felt this presence come on me, and I just started sobbing. And so here I am in this Bible study. The guy's trying to read the Bible, John chapter 3. I'm sobbing, and I'm right at his feet. And I, of course, two girls are on either side of me, and they're comforting me because they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And this guy, after a while, he, started to read louder because he was trying to read over me.
Yeah.
And then he finally just kind of kicked me and says, "Hey, bro, man, you're interrupting the Bible study." and I didn't know what I almost wanted to say, but hey, bro, I'm getting saved here, But I just walked away from that meeting, and I just didn't even know what to do. I just said, "God, if this is you, I will follow you all the days of my life." And so I came the next week, and I told them what happened, and they says, "Oh, you've been born again." And so I says, "Okay, that's great. What do I do?" And they said, "Well, just start reading your Bible and start praying and asking God to teach you, and he will." And so I did that. And so eventually we came to the States, and my dad got involved in Amway. And we didn't really go to church, but he would go to the Sunday services because he liked the Southern gospel music.
Okay.
So we found a church.
Where were you living then?
By this time, we're living in Virginia on the East Coast. So we found a church that did this Southern gospel style of music. It was an Assembly of God church. And so we would go to this Assembly of God church. And long story short, he didn't like that church because he didn't like all the charismatic stuff, and so we went to a Disciple of Christ church, which is what he grew in.
Just the opposite, right?
Total opposite. And I'm sitting in this, Disciple of Christ church. I thought I was drying up in a sense because I didn't sense the Holy Spirit as I had done, in the other things. But I heard in this Disciples of Christ church, well, God doesn't do miracles anymore. God doesn't do this anymore. Those were for that day. And I got confused. I actually went through a little bit of a crisis of faith because I thought, well, if the Bible isn't true, what do I do? And so we eventually moved to California, and I was working at Burger King, went out on my break, turned on the Christian radio station, and there was a man on the radio, and he said, all the Bible is true. You can believe it 100%. God does everything in the New Testament today. It's all relevant. He still works in miracles. And it was Pastor Chuck Smith with Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.
Wow. I recently interviewed Pat Boone, and he explained how he got kicked out of the Disciples of Christ. He was disfellowshipped for speaking in tongues.
Yeah.
And I interviewed one of his daughters, and they were explaining that they had to sit there at the church in Inglewood while the elders read this reason why he was getting kicked out, because obviously the apostles, it all ended with the apostles, and Pat Boone didn't agree with that. So what you were saying is very interesting.
Yeah, and so to find someone that said, this is true, you can trust it, you can believe it, all that it says is relevant for today. Yeah. Just blew my mind. So I would time my breaks to listen to, Pastor Chuck on the radio while I was advancing my career at Burger King. And but I knew I didn't want to be there. So as soon as I learned that a Christian bookstore had opened up in Vista, I left my career at Burger King and went to work for the Christian bookstore.
Was that a step up or a step down?
It was, for me, it was a step up, And the two people, Chuck and Iva Eason, and they were the ones that opened up this Christian bookstore. And I was one of their first employees. And I would bring my guitar because it wasn't a very busy Christian bookstore. And I would just play and sing these songs out of this brown book I had, this Young Life book. And they noticed I played guitar, and they brought me Praise 1 through 4. They gave me 2 song books, Rejoice in Jesus Always, and the Praise Song book, and said, learn these songs, come to our Bible study. Went to the Bible study, and they said about a month later, we're going to start a church. It's Calvary Chapel Vista, and Holland's our worship leader.
Wow.
And I was 16 at the time.
That's wonderful. Well, we want to hold that thought because this is going to be very dramatic because we've now got you as the worship leader, but we have you now getting arrested at Checkpoint Charlie. I mean, he's left Burger King, and that must have been heartbreaking. And now, Checkpoint Charlie.
I like Holland's story better.
So you were coming back to the border there, and you got into trouble. What happened?
The story when I was caught.
Yes.
I was coming back to the border. I'd been in East Germany overnight and had taken about 1,000 Bibles in. Had a van with a big tank in the back. This tank was about 6 feet long. And 2 people could actually fit inside. And Dan, that night I unloaded, late at night by the Elbe River outside Magdeburg, East Germany, and then went and visited a pastor around midnight or so. He wasn't home. I had to go to another pastor's home, knock on his door. So late, he didn't know me.
There wasn't the technology. You couldn't just phone and
we didn't have cell phones, and so I visited him. I delivered the Bibles that night, but I had missed 2 little booklets, two little books when I was unloading. So I had put that end, that cap, back on the tank. And there was 2 little booklets in there that I, didn't see.
These are by myself. Christian booklets.
Christian books, My flashlight, I was nervous, in the unloading part of it, and by myself, and it was dead of winter, just very cold. So I made my way the next day back to the border. The same guard was there at that time. He searched me again. He questioned, what I had been doing. I'd only been there 24 hours. I had this big tank. This can't be normal. And so he got a crowbar and was able to pry it open. The alarm bells went off, and they ran over to frisk me and search me, and 10 hours of interrogation and threats, of imprisonment and so forth. So it was pretty scary.
I bet, So in the end, I understand they charged you with drug smuggling.
Yeah, well, they threatened me with putting me in prison for 8 years for smuggling drugs. And I knew that I wasn't smuggling drugs.
But there was no evidence, was there?
No.
That doesn't matter really.
But if they wanted to plant some evidence, they're going to. You know, you go to another country, it's not like you have rights.
Yeah.
You have to abide by their law, and if they want to do this to you, they will, and I knew that.
Yeah.
What they really wanted to know was, where did I go? Who did I visit?
Yeah.
Why was I there? Who paid me? Who did I work for? Because they assumed I worked for the CIA. I was a covert operative in their minds. Because a missionary, no, it doesn't exist. Out of the goodwill of your heart, people are supporting you? No, that doesn't exist. Not in communism days.
Right.
You see, you're a covert, operative for a foreign government trying to undermine our purposes in our country. So that's how they viewed it.
Wow. So how long were you held?
I was there for 11 hours. They interrogated me for 10 hours.
Dear me.
And they used 2 different interrogation teams.
Did they have the Mr. Nice Guy and Mr. Nasty, or was
Actually, yes, they did. They had a good guy and a bad guy. The second interrogation team was more professional.
it in English?
I asked for a translator
Yeah.
because they knew I spoke German,
Yeah.
and they started off in German. And I knew this was going to be, a long night. So I asked for a translator.
Yeah.
It worked out quite well, actually.
Yeah. Wow. So finally, after all this time, you had to sign some sort of form, did you?
Yeah, they gave me this protocol to sign that I was guilty of breaking the laws of East Germany and so forth. And I signed that, and they eventually let me go. They performed a trick in a sense that they put me out there in the snow in the van, and they said, okay, you can leave now. I'd only been there about 3.5, 4 hours. You can leave now. And the guard brought my passport out to me. And right when he handed it to me, another guard came out and said, halt, wait a minute, wait. And he took my passport away.
Oh, boy.
I went inside, and I thought, oh, what's going on? I was relaxing inside. And then the doors to the garage opened up, and they waved me back in.
Oh, dear.
And I got out of the van. They started yelling and screaming at me, pulled me into a room, started this interrogation all over again with a fresh team after I had relaxed.
Oh,
You see, and
that was
you're
clever.
thinking you're going free, and
Yeah.
then, I mean, you're wondering, am I going to go to prison?
Yeah.
Am I prepared for that? Of course, I don't want to do that, but
Yeah.
all these things are just going through your mind. Your
course,
mind is
yeah.
fried. You're on your
Yeah.
wits end, sort of.
Yeah. I once was arrested in Nigeria and spent night in a cell there, and it was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life.
That's why we like to get together.
a couple of prisoners. I had a rifle stuck in my back, and I was frog marched across the tarmac at Lagos Airport and kicked out the country. But what happened to you in the end?
Well, they let me go, and
Yeah.
that night I crossed back into West Berlin and called a buddy there, and I figured I was followed, so parked on a little side street somewhere there in the city, and then walked and made sure I wasn't followed. He came and picked me up at a meeting place there. It's 2 or 3 in the morning, and drove home to our apartment.
Was that in the
dropped
winter
me
as
off.
well? Was
Yeah,
it?
it was
Yeah.
in January, and my wife was waiting for me, and she, they were worried, of course. Either
Yeah.
I'd had an accident or I'd been caught.
But there
one or
was
the
no
other.
way of letting her know at the time.
No, there wasn't, and
Yeah.
the result was I was blacklisted,
Yeah.
and they began a operation to apprehend me
Huh.
after that.
Now, when we come back after Holland's escape from Burger King to Calvary Vista, we're going to find out about your file on the Stasi,
Yes,
the
yes.
secret police.
Yeah.
But
Oh my goodness. The only police interaction I ever had was I got in trouble for tagging. We would tag the walls on base, and then we'd light them on fire.
Oh, no.
So you'd see this great burning word.
Yeah.
I wouldn't suggest anybody do this, but especially on a military base.
Oh,
but I
boy.
did get caught and brought to the military police station
did you get beaten up
under
or
gun
tortured?
with gunpoint. Yeah.
Were you tortured?
I wasn't tortured, but my dad did.
He wasn't
did.
too
He
happy.
tortured you.
No, he tortured me afterwards once he got the news on it.
Well, one of the reasons why I was fascinated to have you on, Holland, is because of your association with worship music. And it started, as you mentioned, in this bookstore. How on earth did they realize that maybe God had given you this gift?
Well, I never realized that I had any kind of gift. In fact, I don't even perceive it in that way today. Because back in those days, there were no worship songs per se. There wasn't, we didn't really talk about worship. The only time you talked about worship was on Sunday mornings, and you went to what? A worship service.
Yeah.
And so the conversations we have today about worship didn't exist back then. And so, so this was all brand new territory. And all I did in front of people is what I did when I was alone with the Lord, and I would sit with my guitar in my bedroom, and I would sing these songs to Jesus, and I would sing for hours. And I would notice that at a certain point in time, something would change in the room. There'd be a change in the atmosphere. It was like I felt like another presence in the room. Although I didn't have language to it, I couldn't tell you what it was. I couldn't say it was the presence of God because I didn't know those things.
Yeah.
And so as I would get in front of people and I would learn, these praise 1 through 4 songs, and I would start playing them, I noticed the same thing would happen when I was in front of people. I would sense something change in the room, and there would be a presence, and then I'd open my eyes and people would be crying, and they'd be, weeping, and they'd have their hands lifted up, and they were kind of lost in this moment with God. And I didn't really understand what was going on. It wasn't until later that I started having, worship conferences, and I went to the first Calvary Chapel worship conference they ever had, and it was small, and and they started to tell you what worship was and how to do it and all these sorts of things. And, I began to put language to it. But part of what I've come to, through all these experiences, I was at one church where my wife and I were newly married, and
Tell us about your wife just before you go on to that.
Oh my goodness!
She's sitting behind the camera.
She's the beauty in my life. She's amazing.
Her name is.
And those that know her, know that I married my entertainment. She's the life of the party.
And her name is.
Her name is Roxie.
Great.
Yeah, Roxie Davis. And actually, my pastor set us up.
Oh.
And I was playing at a wedding.
Yeah.
And I learned a bunch of country western songs. And so I was playing a wedding and playing these country western songs for a dance.
Yeah.
And I'm the worship leader of this church. And so my pastor comes up to me and says, I need to talk to you. And I thought, oh, I'm busted. I'm playing country western songs at a dance.
That's pretty wicked, yeah.
I'm the worship leader,
Yeah, exactly.
So he takes me downstairs and he goes, you know that girl Roxie? And I says, no, I don't know who you're talking about because I'm not great with names. And so he described her to me. And of course I knew exactly, she's cute. She dresses really nice. And and she did. She was the best dressed, cute little girl in the church.
Yeah.
But I always thought she was out of my league.
Yeah.
And so he looks at me and goes, well, she's got the hots for you. You should go for it. and he goes, she's dating a non-Christian. She needs a good Christian influence. And of course, I'm a good, obedient servant to my pastor. And so I just felt like I needed to go do that. And
so how did you break it up then?
Well, I actually had a friend who was he was my prayer partner at the time.
Yeah.
And we would go pray for people, and God would do miraculous things. We were seeing miracles and stuff. And so I heard she was sick, and she had tonsillitis, and so of course
that was the perfect occasion.
That was the perfect occasion to go. And I called her up and said, hey, we're from the church. We want to come and pray for you. And so we went over, and of course I didn't know she had not taken a shower in days, and of course immediately she jumps in, gets all beautified and all that sort of stuff. And we walked in and prayed for her, and she got instantly healed. God instantly healed her of this tonsillitis, and she's not been sick with it since.
Wow.
So I'm looking pretty good
Yeah.
at this point. And I invited her to a concert I was doing at a coffee house.
Yeah.
And we went out afterwards, and the rest is history.
Wow.
God just brought us together. And
So how long ago was that?
it'll be 30 years this year
Amazing.
that God brought us together.
That's
so
great.
Praise
Do you
the
have
Lord.
kids as well now?
yeah, we have 3 kids,
Wonderful.
and they're all creative in their own way, and some of them involved in music, some in art. My wife's an artist, and so.
That's great. When we first met, you were very much involved with Calvary Chapel Music, I think.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
Well, originally I was with Maranatha Music. I had been with them for about 3 or 4 years.
And that was the original worship label, wasn't it?
Right.
Was it the first?
That was the first worship label kind of born out of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.
Yeah.
And so when I was there, I initially came in to be a marketing director. And then shortly after that, the A&R director left. And so they made me the A&R director. And the A&R stands for artist and repertoire, you know, but it's mostly meeting people and traveling. So we used to say it stands for airports and restaurants. That's basically what we would do. But at Maranatha Music, I was involved in putting together one of the most influential collections of worship music called the Wow Worship Series. With Vineyard Music, Integrity Music, Worship Together, and EMI, and basically through Wow Worship, it kind of gave a centralized way for worship to become mainstream in the church, and those worship projects sold well over 500,000 units, went platinum. It was and a song I had written called "Let It Rise" was actually on the first compilation. It was kind of voted on to be a part of that.
Oh, that's great.
And so, but through that, we also did another series called Top 25, which did the same kind of thing, and then I started a label called Worship Underground, where we were beginning to discover the music from the church was kind of rising up, and it was more contemporary, more relevant. And I signed this guy that was out of a little church in Waco, Texas called University Baptist Church, and his name was David Crowder.
Oh, wow.
And so,
Seriously, that's amazing.
so I signed him to his first like full-blown record deal, distributed.
Did he still have the same look, or did he?
Well, when I met him, he had a different look, and then then once he kind of got connected to Passion, and he was doing DCLA, we kind of brought him out for youth specialties, and he was introduced to Pev Jackson from Young Life, and then got involved with DCLA, and like literally overnight he was in front of 500,000 kids.
Wow.
And he just blew up.
Let me just see if we can show this on the screen. But this is a book that you've written. I don't know whether we can zoom in a little bit, but if not, not to worry. I think the sounds come off. But it's called Let It Rise. Tell us about that.
Well, basically, one of the things I've been involved with from the beginning is training. I have a passion to train leaders, and so as we were writing worship songs and doing all these stuff, part of me becoming a worship leader was kind of there's a story behind it, because I really believed I was called to be a rock star. And so, I mean, like all musicians, young Christian musicians, and we had formed this band. We were one of the first punk rock Christian bands.
What was it called?
It was called Philadelphia Band, and we got thrown out of churches and all kinds of stuff, and we were working with this, new thing called MRC, which was Maranatha Resource Center. And it was Maranatha Music had put this or Ministry Resource Center. And it was Bill Venezuela and different guys that were at Costa Mesa were involved in this, and they were giving young bands like mine a shot, to kind of get an album and put a tour together and all this stuff. And, so we were all poised to do that.
Were you the singer then?
I was the singer, the primary songwriter.
Were you like Johnny Rotten in any way? Or?
Well, I wasn't that rotten, but we definitely dressed the part. I mean, we looked like, punkers when we would play. And these were not the Orange County, expensive boots punkers. These were the original kind of punkers with the attitude. And we would walk into these places and we'd have major attitude. But hardcore preaching the gospel. But to make a long story short, we're getting ready to go on tour, and the Lord on the way to rehearsal goes, I haven't made you for this. I made you for worship. And in my mind, I'm thinking, but Lord, worship is what you do when you can't make it in the real world.
Ooh, wow.
That's not first place. That's like last place. And the Lord says, I've made you for worship. And I says, but Lord, I'm supposed to be a rock star. And I says, well, here's the deal, Lord. You're going to have to take it all away. Because I'm going for it unless you take it all away. And I go to rehearsal. At the end of the night, every person had their own reason, but the entire band quit.
Wow.
In one night.
For what reason?
One guy had gotten married and gotten a new job, couldn't leave his job to go on tour. We had personality clashes in the band, and so the two guys with the personality clash, they quit. And and then it got down to me and the drummer says, well, I'm not going to be in a band with one guy in it, so I quit too, So I'm here, and literally in one night, the Lord took it all away. And I'm driving home, and I'm in tears because I'm thinking, I just...
Yeah, your dream.
My dream was gone, but more importantly, I knew that God was speaking to me.
Yeah.
And that he really had a first place in worship. And so that's when I started really writing a lot of worship songs. I put all my creative energies that I put into the rock music, and I put it into writing worship music.
Wow.
And
well, we're going to go back to this gentleman, and then I want to find out what is the procedure when you write a song. I'll be interested to find out, but Stasi.
Stasi, yes.
Explain who Stasi was and how you found out.
Well, he was probably a true punker.
I'm enthralled in Holland stories. Punk rocker,
But the Stasi were the secret police of East Germany, and they had, was it millions of files on
Oh,
people?
yes. Yeah, millions of files.
So
absolutely. Yeah.
you eventually went back to Berlin, and you found your file.
Yeah, it's amazing. The East German secret police, Dan, they didn't have computers, so they recorded everything on paper. They, typed it all out on. So they had just buildings full of files, file folders. They documented everything, very meticulous in their record keeping.
Which is very German, isn't it?
So very German. So one day here, I was told by a friend of mine, you could request your dossier. You could, you were caught and so forth. They have to have information on you. You should read through the German Freedom of Information Act. So I did. I wrote a letter and waited and got a response and wrote them back, and then went and visited. And sure enough, after about 2 years, I received a package in the mail here in California, 233 typewritten pages, original pages, and from the Stasi. And
in German, presumably.
In German.
Yeah.
And it detailed a covert operation that they began to apprehend me. And that operation began 2 years after we moved out of Berlin and moved back to America.
Wow.
So I didn't know it at the time, but I did know that I was blacklisted and followed. It had been, So I didn't go back to East Germany for several years. And it was during that time period that they were wanting to apprehend me the next time I entered the country. So, yeah, they started this plan. They had, a list of 10 things they were going to do to infiltrate the organization, to apprehend me, to get information from other countries about my whereabouts and what I was doing. And the gentleman in charge, the spy or the officer in charge, he documented how he requested funding for the operation and so on and so forth. And anyway, they were successful because I quit going to East Germany, so they even accounted that to their success of their operation.
Did they have a name for the project that was going to destroy you?
Operation Andreas was their official name. It's stamped on the front page of the dossier.
Why was it called that then?
Operation Andreas. Andreas is a German name.
Yeah.
I don't know why they called it that.
Yeah.
But it was actually strange, sitting there at home on the couch, sort of reading kind of a history of your life a little bit. It's kind of.
And is that in this book, Leaving the American Sector? You've got a bit about that there?
I have a little bit about that. That's actually in the next book.
Yeah. There we go.
Leaving the American Sector was the sign on the Berlin Wall all across the American sector, just warning people, you're leaving freedom now and you're crossing over this border into, communist territory. Now
you then started, many years ago now, Eastern European Outreach, which a lot of people will know about. And as if that wasn't enough, you're now banned from Russia.
Yes.
I think we've got a couple of real troublemakers here. The Sid Vicious of Calvary Chapel. And what happened with the Russian thing?
Well, while Holland was, rocking, I was getting arrested, So, the wall came down and we began going to Russia and worked in prisons. So in the 80s, I was banned, from Russia for 7 years. Blacklisted through being caught and being publicized. I was blacklisted for 7 years, and then in the 90s began preaching the gospel in prisons, in Russian prisons. But later on in the 2000s,
no, don't just let that pass.
Okay, I'm
Tell
sorry.
me about that. That's an incredible story.
Yeah, well, the Russian government became our partner, and they organized our ministry. What prisons we would go to, how long it would take to get there. We would organize.
Were they youth prisons mainly? Or?
Mainly youth prisons. There've been about 100 prisons total.
Yeah.
Our contract was for teaching a rehabilitation program in the 60 youth prisons in the Russian Republic. And I worked with the government, with the generals and the Ministry of Interior to organize the ministry, and we would debrief after the trips were made. I'd go to their birthday parties. I actually became very good friends with one of the colonels there. We've had Russian colonels, generals in our home here in California.
Huh.
Yeah. So the Lord opened a door for a period of time, for about 8 years.
And then suddenly
it gradually was closing.
And you got caught up in it? What happened?
Well, actually politics is what happened, but they never have told me. But I was banned again in 2008, 2009. Where I arrived in Moscow, and they wouldn't let me in. And they held me in a holding cell for about 4 hours, put me on a plane. The plane took off to go back to Frankfurt, Germany. I'm sitting there in the last row of the plane thinking, okay, what am I going to do now?
Oh, yeah.
And a flight attendant walks back and says, "Are you Mr. Thompson?" I said, "Yes." And the passport was given to me then. That moment. I was wondering, I don't have a passport.
Oh, boy.
They didn't tell me a thing. They just held me in this holding cell.
Did they put persona non grata in your passport?
They didn't stamp it in the passport. But they say that in my case, because of the book and so forth, that I shouldn't worry about going back.
Huh. Wow. Dear me. What a couple of unusual people we've
Yeah.
got here. Okay, back to worship music. Now, I'm a writer, and I sit there in front of a blank screen and have to put a story together or a book or whatever. What's the procedure in writing a song?
Well, there is a skill and a craft to it, and a lot of people center in on the craft. But the thing that I've always noticed about at least the songs that God has given me is that I'm more of a inspirational writer, and one of the things that when I teach songwriting classes is I call my songwriting class prayer songs, because that's really what they are. They're our prayers set to music. I define worship in my book as our sung prayers, and so I really look at worship leaders as the prayer leaders of the church. They're the ones that gather the congregation together, and they sing their prayers to God, and that's why it's so important for worship leaders to be connected to the people, not be in the back room, in the green room, having fun and eating food while the pastor's preaching. They need to be amongst the people, and so that they're hearing what the people is hearing, experiencing what the people are experiencing.
So do you have like a notebook and you write stuff and
I don't. I used to, but I realized that as I would go back to those ideas, they never really came to much, and really the ones that have come out have been almost given to me the way they are. For instance, the song "Let It Rise" was really a spontaneous song. I was teaching, or I was asked to lead worship at Calvary Chapel of Pacific Beach in San Diego, and their midweek service was in a coffee shop.
Right.
And my regular drummer couldn't make it, so the bass player said he had a drummer, brought the drummer in, and so we're trying to learn these songs, and it just wasn't going well. And we're about to start. I'm getting really anxious and frustrated, and I'm thinking like this is going to be a disaster. It's going to be a train wreck. And as we're praying for the service, in my heart I'm just saying, Lord, if you don't rise in this place, if your presence just doesn't manifest itself, if your glory doesn't fill this place, this is going to be a disaster. And so, as I'm praying this prayer, I'm kind of strumming these chords. And so I go back out, we're about to start. And so I turned to the band and said, here's the chorus. I figured they didn't know the other songs.
Yeah.
What's one more, right? So
So it was almost, it just came out there.
it just kind of came out. And then I just turned and I just started singing, let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Let the presence of the Lord, let the songs of the Lord. And it was like, oh, let it rise. But it wasn't like this fun, happy, oh, let it rise. It was like this cry, this gut-wrenching, like, oh, like, let it rise.
Wow.
And something incredible happened in that room. I mean, it literally, the room stopped. And people quit talking, and they put their food down, and they lifted their hands, and they started to sing this song as if they'd known it their whole life.
Wow.
I mean, it just, the whole place just erupted.
Huh.
And so about a couple months later, this is before I was at Maranatha, I was asked to come to Maranatha as a worship leader and hear some of their songs and give them feedback like would I do at my church.
Yeah.
But they turned the tables on us and they said, do you have a song for us to hear? And so I, as the songwriter, I'm thinking, wow, this is my shot. And I played all my hits and they said, no, those aren't good. We don't want those. And And I got to through all my hits, what I thought were my hits. And they said, well, do you have anything else? And I said, well, I have this one. It's not even a song. It's just like an idea.
Yeah.
And I played Let It Rise.
Oh.
And the same thing happened in that room. It just erupted. And everybody goes, that's the song. You have to get it to us tomorrow.
What year was that then?
This was 94.
Huh.
And so I sent them a demo tape. I went home, made a little demo tape, sent it. They sent it to Paul Balash.
Yeah.
Paul Balash recorded it on Praise Band 7. And then that year, Promise Keepers recorded it for their events. And so I was there at Promise Keepers when they played it for the first time in Los Angeles Coliseum, and just seeing 60,000 guys just sing Let It Rise was just incredible.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's gone everywhere. It's been in the Harvest Crusades, Franklin Graham's, Billy Graham's. It's it's gone around the world. And it's funny because then people say, hey, why don't you come and teach us how to write this incredible songs that you've written? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question because I feel like it was a gift. Like I just received it. I didn't really write it.
Do you ever get concerned that some of the worship leaders see themselves as special rock stars almost? And is there a danger?
Well, I actually, that was one of the things I saw. Like when we went from the band format to the worship leader, and you saw the recording start to feature the worship leaders, I actually turned to one of my friends. I said, now we're going to see the rise of the worship leader star, the rock star worship leader. And that's what we see in our culture today. There's almost like the worship leader is seen almost like as a rock icon.
Yeah.
And I think it can be dangerous unless the person understands, their place in Christ.
Sure.
And I know Chris Tomlin personally. He's a guy that loves the Lord. And so he never sees himself in that way at all. He's been a local church worship leader his whole life, even until now. David Crowder's the same way. Paul Balash is the same way. Tommy Walker's the same way. Some of the great Tim Hughes, worship leader at Holy Trinity Brompton in your country. Yeah,
and I've interviewed him. He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, and they've all understood that this is really a work of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Matt Redman's the same thing. He's always been the worship leader of a church. And so they've never seen themselves in that light, and that's why I appreciate guys like that.
That's great. Well, coming back now to the Troublemaker, you've now changed the ministry from Eastern European Outreach to Mercy Projects. Why did you do that? And two, tell us about Conotop and that work there.
Yeah, Dan, Eastern European Outreach was great, although these days, we don't really relate anymore to Eastern Europe. So I was speaking in a class on a college campus and talking about Eastern Europe, and they were kind of not understanding what I was talking about. The Cold War, when was that? I'm not sure when that was, the Cold War. So realized we really need to change our name, but not our focus. We want to preach the gospel. We want to help the poor, the needy, children at risk, but the name's got to go. Eastern Europe doesn't exist anymore. So Mercy Projects, showing God's mercy to the poor, disenfranchised, children at risk. That's what we're about. So we're really doing a lot of the same things, still working in Ukraine, in Russia, and Kosovo, Armenia, Georgia. So still working in Eastern European countries. However, now we can work here in the United States. We are working with kids before they enter the foster program in Riverside County. We're able to do other things that are outside of Eastern Europe. In Ukraine, one of the things we're doing there is working in this little town called Konotop, and it's a handicapped or a special needs center for children.
And presumably they don't get very good treatment there, do they?
Yeah, families, children. There are no resources for special needs kids or people in general. There's no wheelchair access for the handicapped into public buildings, as an example. They don't have wheelchairs, much less the access into their apartments. So parents, or say a single mom, is carrying her daughter or son with cerebral palsy, down 6 flights of stairs and into a taxi, and it's just a very tough life. So some gals got together in this little town called Konotop, wanted to help one another with their children, sort of band together, and maybe you could find a job and I could, babysit your child or spend time with them, or I could find a job. So they bound together, and we came along and found them and talked to them and helped them get a building and helped them organize. And so we started this center. Now 40 kids are attending. The mothers are bringing their kids there. We're sending teams in to help work with those kids. But one of the mothers, told me here recently, she said that this place is so special because our children get to be normal here. They're not abnormal.
Right,
They're not
that's
special
wonderful.
needs here.
Yeah.
Here they're normal.
Yeah.
They get to get on the stage and take part in a play and be Cinderella.
Yeah.
They get to rent the costumes and
Yeah, because
And,
my son Peter's been several times
Exactly,
now.
exactly.
And they seem to have so much fun. And the volunteers who go from Europe or here seem to be more blessed than the kids,
well, these kids are just like gold inside. You see beyond their disability.
Sure.
And you realize, God loves them. Jesus died for them as well. And these mothers, they come to tears every time because they appreciate
Because
the
somebody
support.
cares for them, yeah.
They have zero support, no support. So it's a wonderful place. And you also love working with people who are not just waiting for a handout, but who are working very hard themselves to minister to their kids.
And you've come up with an idea of inviting people to go from sunny California to Ukraine for a winter camp. What a deal.
Pretty crazy, isn't it?
Tell us about that.
Must be why very few people ever go, No, we do camps for kids in Ukraine. These are basically camps that used to be used for teaching communism or, the old Soviet camps. And we'll bring in 100 kids in at a time and just teach them the gospel, get them saved, do all kinds of classes with them, and just have a great time. Just a solid filled week. Just a week filled solid with activities and Bible studies. But it's in January.
Yeah.
And it's cold over there. So you leave your flip-flops at home.
Yeah.
You borrow a jacket from your
Hawaiian
uncle
shirts,
in Minnesota, and
Yeah.
you get on that airplane.
Yeah.
And so there's 100 kids there. There's translators, Christian translators. There's counselors.
Yeah.
And you just become a part of the team.
And how do they apply?
Well, just go to our website, mercyprojects.com.
It's very simple.
You just go to the website and click on mission trips, and you can send us a question or fill out an application.
Great. And very quickly, North Korea. You've got a project in North Korea. Can you show us a little bit?
Yeah.
I have actually been to North Korea. I went there as a journalist, and you're involved in spreading the light to one of the darkest, if not the darkest country on earth. I don't know whether we can see it here on camera.
Don't know if we can. There we go.
We can hold it up there.
Yeah. Dan, this right here, this part is the solar panel.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a small solar panel on the top. Okay. And North Korea is the darkest country on earth. If you look at a satellite map taken, in the evening, at nighttime, it's completely dark.
Yeah.
It's not only spiritually dark, it's physically dark.
Because the electricity's not working half the time.
Exactly. I mean, a capital city with 1 million people in it, and there are no lights turned on. at nighttime, except for kerosene or candles that they might have. So some partners that we're working with have developed a solar-powered light that will give them 3 to 4 hours of light at
Wonderful.
night
Yeah.
for reading, for maybe changing diapers of your child, or maybe for some of the students in the university for studying. There is a university staffed by Christians, foreigners,
Yeah.
here from California and other countries, who go spend 8 to 9 months a year over there and work with students from party members and others, teaching classes in the university. They have no other contact to the outside world. They have zero contact to the outside world. So it's a chance to build relationships, to eventually share the gospel, and to meet real needs. North Korea, the most closed country of the world,
Right.
we want to give them 500 lights. Okay, that's just a drop in the bucket. It's nothing. We want to eventually make the lights, manufacture the lights inside the country, provide jobs to believers.
That's great.
Did you know that there was a revival in North Korea in the early 1900s?
Yeah.
It was a
And Billy Graham's
part of the
wife went to
gospel.
school there.
Exactly.
I mean, it was, and then what a warning of what can happen when, you know, you go from being, well, I think it was called the Jerusalem of Asia, Pyongyang.
exactly.
Yeah, so that's wonderful.
We're praying for a breakthrough in
Yeah.
North Korea,
Yeah.
not just to provide lights. This is to help open that door a little wider.
Sure.
There's
yeah.
believers there right now that we can partner with, and so our first step is to open that door
Yeah,
a little bit
that's
wider,
wonderful.
meet a real need.
Yeah.
It's just 3 hours of light. You'd be amazed at their interest. They are
Oh,
so
yeah.
excited about these little,
Well, that'd be
little
wor-
solar-powered lights.
That's
you know.
like gold for them.
You can throw it against the wall and they won't break either. So it's,
Great. Now, as we're coming near the end, you are now based in a lovely place where a gentleman called President Nixon once lived,
Yes.
San Clemente, and
Yes.
you've just run Love San Clemente. Is this the second time now, or is?
Second year doing it. It's an outreach of our church. We planted a church there, Calvary Chapel San Clemente, about 3 years ago. And, you know, it's kind of this new season of our life. You know, there's ministry's always been in my life. And initially when I came to Christ, I just felt called to preach the gospel. But music seemed to be the avenue that happened in until recently. And one of the things that I was looking for is how do we take the church and put it out into the public, square,
Yeah.
and meet people that don't know Christ, that would never go to church. And the Lord gave me this idea of Love San Clemente, and the whole idea is we show the love of God in practical ways.
Is it like a festival or what?
It's like several days of just like public service kinds of things. So like we started on Wednesday this year. On the first day, we ministered to the schools, and we went and actually built classrooms for a school. We built 3 classrooms. Another one, we did a huge cleanup project.
Yeah.
Last year, we painted one of the public schools. On Thursday, the second day, we dedicated that day to the city, and we did a huge beach cleanup, and the city was involved with San Clemente with that. The third day, we wanted to minister to the military, so we went out to Camp Pendleton, and we did a VBS for them and just ministered to as many kids as we could out there, and that was powerful. And then the last day, we ministered to various community groups and ministries. So we had everything from men's discipleship homes to feeding the poor to caring for widows. One of the houses we went and we did a whole bunch of work in, the lady had just lost her husband a month previously and was just completely still mourning the devastation of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And God completely, used that to love bomb her, and so.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. How because it's quite a wealthy area, isn't it? How do the locals, do they like it, or do they think you're interfering, or what?
What's interesting is, as we're out doing these things, people are asking us, what are you doing? Who is this? Why are you doing this? Why are you, and we tell them we want to show the love of God in practical ways.
Yeah.
And I've yet to find someone who says, I hate that idea. Everyone loves, whether they're a believer or not, they're just blown away by that idea. Like, why would Christians go out and just do something for free, just to bless the community.
Sure.
Because in their mind, the church is just there to take stuff from them. They're always asking for money. They're always asking for your time, join, get involved in this ministry. They want to take something from you, but this is the church giving back.
Yes, yeah. Wow. In San Clemente, are there a lot of very well-known people living there, maybe secretly, we don't know? Is it like a Newport Beach area or what?
Yes, yeah. And you don't know who they are, but there's people that do know who they are, and we have some of them in our church,
Wow.
So it's kind of fun, we have some.
They wear dark glasses and.
No. They just one of the things that the cultures we've created is in our church is everyone just come as you are.
Yeah.
Everyone's the same. We welcome everyone the same, but we do take advantage of some of those gifts of those folks, and we're excited about that.
Oh, that's great. Looking back on your many, many years, do you have any sort of love for Japan still?
I do. It's one of those places that's kind of been in my heart, and I haven't been able to get back there yet, but I'm one of those, like Pastor Chuck says, where the Lord guides, He provides. And so, there's so much to do with what He's provided for me to do that, if He provides for me to go to Japan, I would go.
Yeah.
But, really where my heart is these days is for the youth, because when I was 16, we had this guy that would come up and talk about the Welsh revival, and he was in his 90s, and that did something to my heart. I just got this hunger in my heart to see God do something in my generation.
Yeah.
And I think we're coming into the kind of the closing era of a generation of Jesus people. And I'm almost seeing and feeling the need to get the youth together and just to have the stories of Jesus be told to them, like they were told to me when I was 16. And then, Lonnie Frisbee prayed for me when I was 17. That changed my life. That completely rocked my world.
Was that at Calvary, a big Calvary?
It was not here. It was actually at a Calvary Chapel in Escondido.
Yeah. Wow.
But it was unbelievable. But I like this generation has not seen a revival.
Yes, yeah.
They've not seen the things that I've seen.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I just have a hunger for God to do that with them.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Amen.
You coming, you're still doing these trips to Eastern Europe. What would you say to Christians here in America who say, well, why should we care about people in the rest of the world? We've got problems here in the country. What would you say to them?
Well, I agree we have problems in our country, and there's problems overseas. I think it's a matter of obedience. I think God loves us all. The gospel is the same for whether you're in Mexico, Ukraine, or right here in Orange County. It's the same gospel.
Yeah.
God is in the business of changing lives, of transforming lives. So I like to encourage people to step out beyond your comfort zone. It doesn't have to be Ukraine.
Yeah.
It can be going with your church to Haiti. It can be going to your city and love San Clemente and showing the love of God. But get beyond yourself, beyond your comfort zone. As American Christians, what is our main value? Safety. We want to be safe.
Yeah.
We'll study our Bibles till our head is full of Bible studies, but we're safe doing it. We never step out and get into that place of the unknown. Like, if I go talk to my neighbor, what will he say?
Sure.
I don't know, so I don't do it.
Right.
And so I represent not only talking to your neighbor, but maybe talking to that neighbor overseas.
Sure.
And I don't know, God has put, I just hear Holland's story and Dan, your story. The Lord has invested so much in us. We are full of this love. We take it for granted, we just take it for granted. And I just want to see lives transformed. I don't care if they're here in Orange County, Riverside County, or overseas. Let's keep going while we can.
Well, thank you so much, both of you. Holland, your website is hollanddavis.com, is it?
Yeah, and then the church is calvarysanclemente.org.
And yours is mercyprojects.com?
Yes, sir.
What a memory. I can't believe it.
It's amazing.
I want to thank both of you for being on the program tonight. I hope you enjoyed it, were challenged by it, and I hope you'll join us next time. So this is Dan Wooding signing off on behalf of Jeff Thompson and Holland Davis. Thanks, and God bless you.
Did Bible prophecy predict the current financial catastrophe? Are there biblical clues to how soon, if ever, a viable long-term recovery can be sustained? In The Coming Economic Armageddon, Dr. David Jeremiah explains the meaning behind these news-making events and discusses how to prepare for living in the new global economy. The Coming Economic Armageddon by Dr. David Jeremiah is our gift this month for any donation of $20 or more. Please become a co-laborer with us today. We look forward more than ever to your prayers and generous donations that enable his channel to continue broadcasting the good news of Jesus Christ to 192 countries 24/7. Please go to hischannel.com now, click the donation link, or send your tax-deductible gift to His Channel, Post Office Box 25, Santa Ana, California 92702. Thank you. You are appreciated.